So, the National Science Foundation, the NSF, has spent millions in emergency COVID funds last year, but that spending had nothing to do with COVID. Where one grant even went to a college in Massachusetts to study how floodplains respond to climate change, which is just one example of many that we're going to discuss in this article. But the thing I really want to emphasize at the start here is that we have had money to allocate to COVID and long COVID research, but the federal government, the subsectors of the federal government, and then the states did not allocate it appropriately. So, as a reminder, the American Rescue Plan was Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID stimulus package, which the NSF was able to tap into since January of 2023. However, instead of appropriately allocating these funds to COVID research, the money is going to non-COVID related things, which is a huge disgrace. So again, as a part of the American Rescue Plan, Biden was touting this as something that would bring direct relief to families bearing the brunt of the COVID-19 crisis, which includes things like long COVID and people that were initially impacted 4 years ago. And again, we're on year 5 of the pandemic. We've had 4 complete years. We're in our 5th year now. And the NSF pledged to use the funding to support groups of individuals and institutions most strongly affected by the pandemic. And 3 years after signing that legislation, sending $600 million to the NSF, and then again allowing the NSF to tap into this last January for more money, that money is still going out the door through research grants that aren't COVID related. Where the floodplains example at the start of the article was a $246,000 Amherst College study that was meant to deepen our understanding of how floodplains have responded to climatic changes, not COVID. And a more than $7 million grant was awarded 1 month earlier to the University of Texas in Austin, which will help to develop a learning environment that is welcoming to marginalized and minoritized researchers. Again, not COVID. And then another $181,000 was sent to California Polytechnic State University in December to investigate the structural organization and changes therein of a school of fish, where in total the agency has awarded more than $23 million in the American Rescue Plan's grants since January 2023 to projects that are unrelated to COVID. But Democrats are still touting this as a lifeline to struggling Americans, that both Biden and congressional Democrats are still touting to this day would offer vital provisions that would help working families get on their feet and steady the economy. However, in many cases, funding went to obscure projects that were not tied to the pandemic in any way in terms of the American Rescue Plan overall, not just in terms of grant funding. So again, this was a $1.9 trillion COVID stimulus package. The grants have been misallocated, as have the actual fundings for the American Rescue Plan. So, for example, in year 1 after this bill was passed, there was $122 billion in federal aid allocated to the states, specifically for American schools, and only 7% of that budget was spent, which is ridiculous. We could have been using that for revamping the HVAC systems in schools, providing PPE and masks to all the kids, training in the health sciences. But instead, from that 7%, many U.S. districts spent the funds on bonuses for teachers and administrators. And then another example that just makes me angry for these misallocations of grant funds for COVID research, $219,000 to Radford University to study oyster reef erosion. And in this article, neither the White House nor the NSF responded to a request for comment. This was a great article written by Megan Blonder.